All right, what's up, everybody? This is the webinar that we are going to have for specifically for the VIPs. There's a lot of you who submitted questions during the Gottman date night, and some of them didn't get answered from the Gottmans. And so, what we thought we would do for this webinar that we promised you with the purchase of your ticket is to bring Laura Heck back in. Laura is a certified Gottman therapist. She has worked at the Gottman Institute as the director of training and development. Was that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Um, she has spent a lot of time with John and Julie, and a lot of the questions that were asked, we didn't specifically ask John and Julie because they required a little bit of in-depth conversation and a little bit of a longer and more thoughtful answer. So we thought we'd bring in Laura, and she has the Gottman framework, and the answers that she's going to provide as a Gottman certified Gottman therapist are going to fall right in line with what John and Julie would have said from the stage. So my hope is that as you watch this webinar, that even if it's not your question, you find some really important tools and strategies and principles that you can use to apply to your relationship to make it better. So really excited about that. My screen is over here. So if I'm looking off to the side, it's because I'm reading on my computer screen and not staring into the camera. And that's why I'm not making eye contact with you. But I want to read off the first question. Laura, first of all, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
Thanks for asking.
Are you giggling because I just went off?
No, I'm giggling because you said my screen's over here because I have constantly told you in the past that it drives me bonkers that I'm looking right at you, but you're looking over here and
Right.
talking to me. Drives me
It's
nuts.
rude. It's rude to be not be present in the conversation. But anytime I look away, it's because I'm trying to
I
facilitate the
get it.
conversation here. So,
Yeah.
okay. So our first question is: if you find yourself using one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which is a Gottman reference: criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. Um, how do you mend the conversation without having to step away first? I know the antidote is to build a culture of appreciation if you're for one of if the horsemen you're using is contempt. But what can I immediately do in that moment to repair the conversation?
Yeah. Well, I love this question because I find that couples too often sort of pull that ripcord and try and leave the conversation knowing that they don't want to do any further harm, that it would be better if they just cut and said, let's try this again in 20 minutes and did what Dr. Gottman refers to as taking a break, which is a 20-minute break. But I would rather that couples master the art of repair so that they're making all of these small, tiny adjustments. And absolutely, if one of the four horsemen is showing up in the relationship, especially if you recognize that you yourself are using one of the four horsemen, then I would, rather than say, let's stop, let's leave the conversation, I would try and repair. So if I found that I was getting defensive and that was getting in the way of me connecting with my partner or hearing my partner, or maybe I was starting to escalate and get to that place of feeling flooded, then I would do some ownership and I might say something like, gosh, you know what, I understand that I'm feeling a little flooded. Would you mind rephrasing that a little softer so that I can hear your request, hear what you want to say? So what that's referred to is, it's called a repair. And Dr. Gottman refers to that as the secret weapon of masterful couples. Couples that know how to do conflict are able to repair using all of these small minor adjustments along the way. What do you think? What would be a good way to repair in the moment?
Yeah, repair attempts are huge. I think one of the first things that you can do for a repair attempt is just take ownership of the horseman that comes up for you. Like
Yeah.
just acknowledging that it's there and saying, "Hey, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm getting a little defensive," or "Hey, I just noticed I'm being a little bit. I'm invoking a little bit of contempt right now." And
Yeah.
I do that. That's my go-to horseman. Is I'm contemptuous. I'm like
Yeah.
subtly contemptuous. And so I have to call it out and apologize for it in that moment. And
Yeah.
sometimes just acknowledging that it came up helps refocus and get back on track rather than having to take that break. I
Yeah.
think using humor is a good thing.
Hmm.
For example, one of the things that I used to get frustrated with, my wife and I used to get frustrated with each other, is when one of us is talking to the other person and the other person is distracted, whether it's on their phone or watching
Yeah.
TV, typically a screen. And what we originally were doing was having these like long conversations about, oh my gosh, could you please put your phone down and pay attention to me? I'm trying to connect with you. And
Yeah.
it felt heavy every time
Hmm.
that came up. And so we started invoking humor. And so
Hmm.
now every time one of us is feeling a little ignored or like we're not being seen as the priority in that moment, and you're trying to connect with your partner and they're missing that connection, we just go
Yeah.
like this. And it's so stupid. It's so dumb. But
Yeah.
that is like the signal of, hey, I'm trying to get your attention. And this
Yeah.
is our funny way. Like we use a little bit of a sense of humor to get the other person to go, oh, yeah, sorry, I'm not paying attention right now.
Yeah.
And it's worked
Well,
really well.
I think you brought up a good point that repairs are really anything. It could be verbal, nonverbal, it could be a phrase, a statement, it could be a code word, it could be a hand signal. I mean, whatever you want it to be, that just alerts your partner to, hey, we've gotten a little off track. I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm getting a little too emotional. Emotion is good, but emotion can overrun the conversation,
Yeah.
especially if it's bad emotion, if it's anger or frustration. And so if you use one of those code words or whatever that is that you did with your tongue to alert your partner that we're getting off track and your partner
Don't pretend like you don't
recognizes
make
it,
that sound all the time, Laura.
I 100% do. Yeah. So repairs are fantastic. And I would just
Yeah.
say, if you want to have a conversation with your partner and say, hey, let's just come up with a gesture or a phrase that we can use to let the other person know that, man, we are kind of getting sucked away from what we really should be talking about.
Yeah.
So let's get back on track. And that way you're making more repairs than you are actually pulling that ripcord and saying, we need to take a break.
Do you have a favorite repair phrase that you use or
Yeah,
that you see works well with couples?
you know what, it really is, as long as there's an agreement between couples. I often find that it's usually not necessarily what is said, but it's the tone in which it was said
Mm,
that really sticks for couples. So the phrase, would you mind rephrasing that in a softer way, or would you mind being more gentle with me? And actually that's our family repair, is would you mind being more gentle with me? And
yeah.
usually it's me getting defensive because my husband says something and he says it in a tone, and that sends my four horsemen. I mean, I'm like ready, yeah,
Yeah.
ready to get in a fight. So if I just say that, he recognizes that I'm getting defensive, and it probably is because he had a tone. And so he rephrases it and he says, yeah, I'm sorry. I just, I wasn't thinking. Let me rephrase that.
That's awesome. Ours
Yeah,
is can we start over? Can
totally.
we start over? We are off track. Can we just go back to the beginning and start over? And that seems to
It's a
work really
great way.
well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a mulligan.
Cool. Should we go for the next question?
Yep.
This one says, I would love to have a marriage where I treat my husband like a king and he treats me like a queen. My husband seems content for us to treat each other like fellow servants, and maybe this is his capability level. What is your advice as to a course of action going forward? Is settling for good enough the best option for each other and our children?
Okay, so there's actually a lot to unpack here. And I think I'm
There is a
probably
lot.
just gonna, yeah, I think I'll just focus, just because I know there's so many questions, on one aspect, which is the should we just settle for a good enough marriage? And I know that you have a lot to say about this because because you're Nate Bagley and I know your platform and what you stand for. But I absolutely think that you should never settle for good enough. And in fact, if you see something in your relationship that isn't hitting the mark of expectation, you have this idea in your head of the type of marriage that you want to have, and something's not quite right, we absolutely need to be able to address that issue and with our partner and say, this isn't working for me. How can we find a solution that meets my needs? So
Definitely.
the only way in a relationship that you are going to continue to grow better and better, stronger, more connected, is if you're able to have conflict, if you're able to address these issues and have a conversation that might be a tough conversation to have, but have your partner then say, okay, if this is a concern of yours, then how can I help meet your needs? How can I be a part of the solution? So if this is a problem, and oftentimes I find that resentment builds up when we either don't address it. And I will tell you that I've worked with couples in a lot of different states. Utah has this unique culture of folks that don't like to address conflict. It's uncomfortable, or maybe they have learned that when I do bring up a conflict issue, it goes so poorly that I'm just going to ignore the fact that it's even there.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure with this one in particular, with this person, if they are avoiding conflict by not bringing this up with their partner, but absolutely we need to learn how to say, this is what I would love to have happen in our relationship, and have the partner respond in a way that says, if this is a concern, I want to be part of the solution. So what are your
I love
thoughts?
that.
Because I know that having a mediocre marriage is just not you're not a fan of it.
No, no. I think one thing that I would throw in here is the context of this question seems a little bit like the wife is making the husband the problem. There's a
Mm,
little bit of my husband doesn't want to be treated like a king or to treat me like a queen. He just seems to be okay with us being servants for each other. Should we
mhm,
settle? So she's basically saying, I want something better. My husband doesn't, so he's the problem.
mhm,
Um, I want to remind people that you cannot complain your way to a great marriage.
hmm,
It doesn't work that way. When your partner feels like they're constantly the problem, when they feel like they are the source of all the issues and the tension and the frustration in the relationship, they're more likely to check out because they feel like whatever effort they do put in is never enough.
hmm,
And so I want to advise this woman or man, I'm assuming it's a woman, who's to set her husband up to be successful. Your husband may not want right now to treat you like a queen, but maybe ask yourself the question, who would I have to be in our marriage and what would I have to change to incentivize or motivate or make my husband want to treat me like a queen?
hmm,
Are you showing up like the queen that you want to be treated like?
hmm,
It's a really important question, and I feel like most couples who struggle with one person not being invested, if we go back to the Gottman Sound Relationship House, I think there's something lacking in the first three principles or the
hmm.
foundation, which is essentially, you say it beautifully, Laura, all the time. I know you, I like you, and I have your back.
Right.
So my guess is that somewhere in your relationship, your friendship foundation is lacking. Either
Yeah.
you've forgotten to continue to get to know each other and know each
Yeah.
other's heart and desires and goals and stresses and fears and all the things that are going on in your partner's world and them with knowing what's going on in your world,
Yeah.
or you're missing out on enjoying each other's presence. Like, people are willing to go above and beyond for people that they like, and if your partner's
Hmm.
not willing to go above and beyond for you right now and you're not willing to go above and beyond for them, maybe there's some investment that you can make in the I like each other pillar.
Yeah.
And then there also
Yeah.
might be some damage in the trust. Like, there might be
Hmm.
some broken promises that you need to take accountability for or apologize for as a relationship. There might be some things you need to ask your partner to apologize for or be held accountable for, and
Hmm.
find a way to move forward so that you can repair that trust. And I think if you can fix that foundation and make sure it's really strong, the desire to show up and treat each other like a king and queen will be
Yeah.
much easier. It'll much more easily fall into place. So you don't have to settle. I would go back and work on those three pillars and see
Yeah.
which one needs the most work.
So I've never heard the phrase "you can't complain your way to a better marriage," which I would love to maybe this is like a something we can do together. But this is that I
Yeah,
love that phrase because oftentimes I find that people, when they do complain, they leave a main component out, which is, if I'm going to complain to my partner, like, I just feel like all I'm doing is I'm just your servant. I am just serving you. I'm meeting your needs, and I don't like this. But oftentimes I think it's so much easier if you, rather than say what you don't want, tell your partner what you do want. Give them something to
definitely.
strive for, and say something like, you know what I would really love? I would love to just be taken out on a date and felt like your queen. I want to be doted on. I want to feel precious, and I want to feel
Yes.
desired. So would you mind just, scheduling and planning a date for me so that I wake up the next morning and I'm light as a feather and I feel like I am, the top priority in your life, rather than
Yeah.
just complaining.
Yeah, there's a couple of experts that I love to reference. One is Terry Real
Hmm.
he wrote a book called The New Rules of Marriage, and he says you're not allowed to complain about not getting something that you've never asked for.
Yeah.
And I think in marriage we oftentimes get frustrated that we're not getting something from our partner that we've never really asked for.
Yeah.
And it's less vulnerable to complain. It's
Mm,
way more vulnerable to say, do you know what I would really like? I would really like to be asked out on a date. Or, you
yeah.
know what? I would really love it if you would just like pick up pizza on the way home because I'm so done and I can't handle doing dinner
Yeah. You don't even
instead of
necessarily need to say, I'm so overburdened with,
yeah,
I've been cooking for you for the last 2 weeks. Can't you just do something for me for once? So you could leave all of that out and just simply
totally,
say, babe, would you mind picking a pizza up on the way home so we can veg out and
absolutely.
connect? Yeah.
Laura Doyle, who wrote a book called The Surrendered Wife, which is really really interesting book. one of the tips that she gives that transformed her marriage and has transformed many of other women's marriages, because she writes specifically to women,
Mm-hmm.
is she encourages people to use the words "I would love it if,"
Mm-hmm.
and set your partner up to succeed. Give them the gift of knowing exactly what you want and
Yeah.
how they can make you feel loved, and then let it go and watch how often he actually tries to do the thing that would make you happy. And you'll find that many times it won't happen the way that you want it to, but the
Mm-hmm.
effort will be there. And really, more often than not, if you've married a good guy, he's going to do what he can to make you feel loved if you just give
Totally.
him the tools and the information. So,
Yeah. Man, I have a lot more to say, and I feel like we could just continue to rip on this one, but I do want to get to the next question.
okay, let's bump to the next one. All right, this is an interesting one. So, I had a lot of thoughts about this one. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about it. It's a little bit
Okay.
longer. I want to encourage my husband to further his education and have goals career wise. However, every time I want to talk about our future, he gets defensive. I see so much potential. He graduated valedictorian and is currently at the highest level he can go in his job with his degree. But he tends to get uncomfortable and doesn't like change. And I think he may be afraid of failure. He also picks up a lot of extra shifts at work to help us out financially, but I don't want him to always have to work so much. My husband's plan when he was going to school was to work as a nurse for a few years and then do additional schooling to further his degree. However, it's been almost 8 years since he graduated with his associate's degree in nursing, and he hates talking about anything related to future goals, future financials, or anything future job related. So my question is, how do I encourage my husband without offending him?
Hmm. So I'm really curious why you have so many thoughts on this.
Um, I have a lot of thoughts because there's a lot going on here. On the one hand, there's the husband in the past saying, "This is step one. I want to do more," and now he's avoiding the
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And so there's something there
Mm-hmm.
underlying where there's an emotional issue or some sort of dread or frustration or fear that he's not willing to address. And then there's the the tone of this message, and totally could just be my perception, is
Yeah.
that the wife is deeply unsettled by her husband's lack of ambition, and
Yeah.
there seems to be a wanting on her end for a different type of life than what she's getting,
Yeah.
and she's trying to solve it by trying to solve her husband
Mm.
and in his problems without addressing like what is going on with her that's making her so frustrated that her husband isn't going on and doing more.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
So
mean?
yeah, the first thing that I would try to unpack is, first of all, let's not even get into the idea of how do we solve the fact that the husband has these previous ambitions that haven't gone anywhere in 8 years. Let's
Right.
put that aside.
let's
Really
just
what I
let's
want to
let's
know,
operate in reality, not in
yeah,
the possibility of what could
assumption.
happen in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I really want to know, and what Dr. Gottman has talked about, is when you have a topic that anytime you try and have that conversation with your partner, it goes so wrong. You go from 0 to 60, you might get emotionally flooded, you might avoid the topic at all costs, become stonewalled, whatever it might be. So rather than try and have that conversation the way that you've been trying to have it, I would say in a time that is neutral and you're not currently fighting, sit down and just say to your husband, I haven't asked you this in a long time, but I would just love to know, like, what lights you up? What makes you feel passionate and on fire? What are you fascinated by? What are your interests? What are your dreams? Don't even talk about goals. Don't talk about nursing. Don't talk about anything related to what you want to know, because she has an idea in her head and a direction that she wants to go,
Yeah.
but instead seek to understand. And that would be a Gottman phrase that I would just put in my back pocket, is rather than try and find resolution, just seek to understand what's underneath everything for your partner. So Dr. Gottman has this whole thing, and it's called love maps. And love map is basically knowledge of your partner's inner world, their hopes, their dreams, their loves, their aspirations, their goals, whatever it might be. And we oftentimes have a pretty deep understanding of our partner's inner world when we first start dating. But we lose that as time goes on because we stop asking these questions. And I would say, let's get back to basics and let's first seek to understand our partner's inner world. Because maybe you get to the root or the heart of all of that if he doesn't feel like he has to be on the defensive, because he's probably pretty aware of what she's interested in, what she wants, and that's why he's dodging it. But instead, if she starts to understand, maybe let me just understand my partner and what his hopes and dreams are, and she might realize maybe they align with his old hopes and dreams, maybe they're completely different, who knows, or maybe there's a lot of fear under there for him and where that fear might come from. But it's a deep conversation that needs to happen between the two of them.
Definitely. I think that'd be a great path forward.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth taking into consideration, from her perspective, what what is the message that the husband is receiving whenever she brings up his career.
Mm-hmm.
um, she might be coming from a place of love, of like, you had this aspiration, I want to champion your dream, I know you wanted to be more than a nurse, what can I do to help you? But what her husband might be hearing is, you're not good enough, you stop
You're a
trying,
failure.
you're a
Yeah.
failure. And understanding how the message is coming across to her husband, that might be lighting him up and making him shut down and making
Mm-hmm.
his emotions flood. And so getting clear on, can you love your husband for exactly who he is and where he's at right now? And
Mm-hmm.
can you accept, not only just love, but accept that this might be the way that life is forever going forward? And can you enjoy that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you find a way to be grateful for the extra shifts that your partner's picking up to provide for the family, instead of resentful of them because he's doing his best to provide for the family with the education that he has?
Yeah.
Can you be grateful for the fact that, he cares a lot about what he does? Like, he may have gone, I don't know if he always was a nurse or if this was a career change for him, but like, how can you show that you love him for exactly who he is, not just under the condition that he pursues this more education and more career? Because
Mm-hmm.
if your love feels like it's conditional, he's going to be
Mm-hmm.
absolutely terrified to have this conversation every time it comes up, because he's probably going to be not only feeling like a failure, but scared he's going to lose you. And
Yeah.
so that might be part of the reason why he's shutting down around that conversation, is because he's scared of what might be at the end of it.
Hmm. Now I'm starting to understand why this was an interesting question for you, Nate.
Yeah.
Knowing what I know about you, I think that this kind of hits home a little bit for you as well.
Yeah. I mean, just as an entrepreneur, like, it's scary to go out. We just did this big date night. It's the biggest date night we've ever done. But for the last
Yeah.
year and a half, I've been hustling to try and make things happen, and haven't been a big financial contributor to my family. And
Right.
there's a lot of fear that can come on your own, and doubt that can come into your own brain. And if that's exacerbated by the people that you love the most,
Yeah.
and when you talk to them, it reinforces the doubt and the fears that you have of yourself. It can really wreak havoc. So I just want to, I mean, you want, I think in an ideal marriage, you want to be each other's biggest fan.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means you have to be proud of where your partner's at right now, not
Yeah.
proud of who they could be one day,
Yeah.
because otherwise they're constantly going to feel deficient. And
Mm.
that's one of the things I appreciate most about my wife, is she's constantly just saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you've done what you've done. This is so amazing." And it's
Yeah.
given me the courage and energy to keep moving forward. So,
That's awesome. I do want to
yeah.
speak a little bit just before we move on to what the wife might be experiencing.
Yeah, please,
And
because this is
because,
definitely a one-sided experience that I shared.
yeah, because, she's saying what we've said is have a conversation with your husband and table your concerns. But I mean, while you're talking to him, but I really would love for her to spend some time and get underneath for her what might be her underlying fear, or what is she attributing this energy to? Because there's something inside her that is spinning. It's a story she's telling herself, or there's something that I would love for her to get to a deeper understanding, that it's not just about wanting to have her husband reach his goals, but what does it say about her as well, and have her do some deeper thinking about that.
Definitely. Well
Okay,
said.
next question.
Okay, let me pull it up here. Next question says, what are some practical and applicable ways we can align our future goals and aspirations if after 18 years of marriage, we find our desires for the future taking us in different directions?
Okay. Well, I love this. We talk about this when we do our 7 principles workshops quite a bit. And
Yeah,
I think that there's an assumption that in order to have a healthy relationship, you need to be pretty well enmeshed, if that is. Like, you have to have the same friends, you have to have the same goals, you have to do the same things. But really, it's a balance between individuality and togetherness. So you absolutely have to have your own passions and do your own things. I have been running for a year now and really pursuing that piece of my life. And I have ran 3 times in the last year with my husband. And that's just because he happened to eat, a massive meal the night before and felt like he needed to burn some extra calories. And he kicks my butt every time. But I don't ask for him to join me on my runs because I know that that's my goal and my personal pursuit. And he doesn't ask for me to join him on these crazy, back adventures in the mountain or whatever it might be. So you need to have individuality, but you also need to make sure that you're aligned and you have some passions that you're pursuing together. And
definitely.
your passions may not just happen. You have to be intentional about creating these moments and these goals that you can pursue together. An exercise that we like to do in our workshop is to help couples align on what their core values are. Once you have identified what your core values are as a couple or as a family, it becomes pretty easy to then start designing and being very intentional about creating activities, goals, things that you can do together that are going to align around your common core values. So you take over from here because you're kind of nodding along.
Yeah, I just love the word that you just used, design.
Yeah.
I think design, to me, brings up the word being very, very intentional and
Yeah.
conscious about how you're choosing to be as a couple. And I think a lot of couples, most couples, I would even argue, they let life live them. They kind of just
Mm,
go with the current of life, and whatever
yeah.
opportunities or circumstances arise, they just kind of face them together. And I
Right.
think, if you've been married for 19 years and you haven't had a conversation, maybe you have had a conversation like this, but it would be good to have a conversation about, hey, our marriage is important. And
Hmm.
we obviously have some interests that are very different that are taking us in different directions. How can we as a couple create some intentional goals or habits or
Yeah.
routines or find some mutual interests that keep us connected while we still pursue these different paths?
Yeah.
And instead of just saying like, well, I guess we just grew apart, you can
Right.
actually consciously choose to stay close together while still
Yeah.
pursuing these individual interests. And I
Yeah.
think that really what it boils down to is truly taking responsibility for designing your life. What is the type of life you want to live? Your marriage doesn't have to look like everybody else's marriage. Your life doesn't have to look like everybody else's life. So
Yeah.
what does your marriage look like down the road? In if both of you are getting what you want and what you need and still having that shared life together.
Yeah. Nailed it. Mic drop.
Boom.
Yeah.
Mic drop
So we
together.
spend in our workshop, I would say, a couple of hours designing what that life is going to look like and helping you to land on basically your mission statement as a couple, which helps to inform your resources, your time and your energy and your money of what you're going to do as a couple. And once you have a pretty clear picture of what that mission statement is, it becomes a whole lot easier to begin designing. So it's sort of a stepped process. If you're interested, we'll tell you more about these workshops, but it's one of my favorite sections that we do in our 7 principles workshop for
Yeah.
couples.
It's really cool to see people come in and just spend a weekend with us and kind of get the training and then actually have time set aside to do the work, like to do the
Yeah.
stuff that is proven to make relationships amazing. And
Yeah.
I always love watching people walk out the door afterwards, just like
Just
kissing and
beaming.
holding hands.
Yeah.
Did I tell you about the email I got the other day?
No.
With the guy who said they've been married for over 2 decades and they were having the best sex they've ever had after doing the 7 principles workshop a few weeks ago.
Really?
That was
I
so
always tell
awesome.
people, think of me. When you're having great sex, I want you to think of
Oh,
me.
Laura, stop.
Makes it really
Stop.
awkward.
Okay, I'm going to go to another question. Um, I think this is an interesting one that this came up a couple of times in the questions, and I think it might be a good one to tackle, especially given the culture here in Utah.
Hmm.
It's how can you make a relationship survive differing opinions on religion?
Ooh, that has been a
Have you seen a lot of
question.
couples come in and talk
Hmm.
to you about this?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm necessarily the best person. So the reason why we're speaking specifically about Utah is there's a large LDS culture,
Yeah.
and I'm not LDS, and so it's been but I do find actually that when couples, either one leaves the church and the other is still in the church, that they seek out someone who's not LDS to help guide them in how to navigate their relationship moving forward. And I think one of the barriers that often comes up is everything changes. Your
Yeah.
worldview, what kept the two of you together and aligned you, the lenses that you guys looked at your relationship and looked at the world has been changed. And so the relationship that you knew is completely different, and you cannot apply the same rules, the same value system, any of that to your new relationship. So you're basically starting with a new contract. And I think that that's a good place to look at it is,
It's a good analogy.
okay, we need to create something completely different here. And we need to look at it. And you can't apply the same rules and the same feelings and the same worldview and the same way that we did things to how we're doing things now. Is it a make or break on relationships? That's your decision.
It's totally your decision.
It's your decision whether this is going to make or break your relationship. I can tell you that I have seen many couples navigate these waters and be able to come out on the other side even more fulfilled. And this kind of goes back to the previous question, which is now they actually have to be very intentional about the lenses that they choose. So rather than taking this worldview that's already been sort of something that you might have grown up with, they're deciding, well, where are we aligned and where are we not aligned? And it becomes a deeper conversation at that point.
Definitely. I
Okay.
think Dr. Gottman has talked a little bit about this, about how a shared religion is not the foundation of a strong marriage, and the foundation is really a strong friendship and mutual respect. And
Wow.
what?
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what I would encourage, I don't want to dismiss the 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 it's a big thing to have your entire framework through which you view life or even the
Yeah.
purpose of life
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah.
That's a big shift to go through. It's a big
Mhm.
change. And for a lot of people, especially in the LDS faith, which I've
Mhm.
been raised in, um, it, when you look at marriage, when you get married, you get married for time, for forever. It's not just till death do you part. And so there's like a lot more. There's like eternal consequences
Yeah.
to when your marriage changes like this, or
Yeah.
there can be psychologically, like that could be the perspective that you take. So what I would encourage you to do, is, one, know that the strength of your marriage is the best thing that you can give. It's the best lesson you can teach your kids. It's the
Mm.
best lesson that you can. It's the best thing that you can contribute to your community, is show people how to have a strong relationship and overcome trials. Two, I would encourage people to keep a long-term perspective, that your beliefs and their beliefs could change continually down the road. This isn't just like a one and done situation, and
Yeah.
to maybe ground yourself a little bit more on the faith side of things, and like be a little bit more patient and think back to the reasons why you fell in love with your partner. There were
Mm.
probably some specific core values that you shared that brought you together. And those core
Mhm.
values may have been more clearly identified through the context of religion, but those
Mm.
core values still exist. And so go back to those core values and figure out what are the attributes, what are the values that your partner exemplifies,
Yeah.
and find ways that you can still see and share and experience those values together as a family. And I guarantee you're going to find just as much fulfillment through
Mhm.
doing that exercise as you are going to just sitting in the church pew next to each other.
So
Um,
I will give you a real life. So I have a couple, and let's see here. He is still attending, but he and his wife are very open about where his belief system is, but he still attends church, the first half of church. And she's a believer. The kids still go to church. But they thought this was going to disrupt their entire marriage, that this was going to tear it apart, and she had a lot of resentment for him leaving the church, sort of internally leaving the church,
right.
even though
How
he's
could you do
still
this to our family?
right.
Yeah, that kind
And
of
I
thing.
had them do exactly what you did, which was establishing their core values. And when I had them write down separately, your core values, now where do they overlap? Wouldn't you believe that they had so many overlapping core values that the values never changed? It was just the lens in which the husband chose is now changing the lenses that he looks at the world, even
Right,
though those are so deeply ingrained. So I thought that was really enlightening. And I think it helped them to recognize that, like what you said, it's a foundation that's not necessarily built on religion. There's
right,
something deeper there. Yeah.
totally.
Cool.
Love that. Good example. Can we do one more question?
Please.
We might have time for one or two more.
Cool.
Um, okay, this one's something that comes up all the time for me, and I'm sure you get it all the time as well, especially being a therapist. Um, I'm
What,
gonna
why
ask the
is it
question.
coming up all the time for you? Is it coming up with people writing in or in your own
Yeah,
relationship?
I get emails from people or texts
Okay.
or phone calls of people going, "Hey, and this is what they say. What advice would you give to a couple that may recognize there's a problem, but one or both of the partners are reluctant to put forth any effort? They continue to go through the motions of a relationship, but aren't committed to changing behaviors or seeking help. Is the relationship doomed if they don't seek change?" It's like my
Hmm.
partner doesn't really want to change, or I feel like there's a problem, but he doesn't or she doesn't. And
Yeah.
what do I do? I feel stuck.
Yeah.
I'm sure, and you can maybe tell me if this is true. This is my follow up question before
Yeah.
you even get to answering the question. But how often would you say you work with a couple where one partner has kind of drugged the other partner
Oh, all the time. Yeah, actually, I will say it's somewhat changing in that now I
in? Good.
find that both couples are basically saying, yeah, we're both here and we both are committed to change. But I'm also the third therapist that they've gone to in the last 3 years. And the first two, they have said, well, he wasn't ready and then she wasn't ready. And I mean, that is kind of the interesting point of when you come to therapy, both people have to be 100% committed
Right.
to making personal change, to wanting and recognizing that in order for this relationship to get better, I have to be the best I can be. And oftentimes I find when couples come to therapy, they're so much more interested in pointing their finger at their partner and saying, in order for this relationship to get better, you have to be less critical. You have to be less sloppy. You have to be all of these things.
Right.
But when you come to therapy with Laura Heck, it's more like, well, let's just take a look at what you have control over. Boom, numero uno. So the only way this relationship is going to get better is when you start taking personal responsibility and saying, I only have the ability to change this relationship if I take personal responsibility in changing myself. That's the only lotus of control.
That's your mic drop moment.
That was, thank you.
Okay, now contextual or conceptually, that's the right word.
Yeah.
Conceptually, that sounds like a great thing. Oh, well, you have control
In
over
the ideal.
yourself, so you need to change yourself.
Yeah.
But what are when you say you need to take responsibility and change yourself because that's all you have control over, what does that look like? Give me some examples of what it means. My
Yeah.
let's put it. I'll give you like a fake example. Okay, my wife is constantly late. She's messy. She doesn't keep her promises. She's disrespectful, and I feel like I'm carrying like 90% of the load. She's carrying 10%. This marriage won't work unless she starts to show up.
Yeah.
Now, what do I do to change myself?
um, so the first thing I think about is, what does that say about me? So if my wife is super sloppy or whatever it might be, I ask myself, well, what does that say about me? It probably says something like, you know what? I don't feel at ease and comfortable in my own space when there is chaos and clothes all over the place or whatever it might be. So I recognize that I need a space of comfort and organization or whatever it might be. So I need to be able to verbalize my needs to my partner and say, I would really love it if blah, 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 blah. There's your phrase that you're talking about. Um, Personal responsibility. I was thinking more as if everything tends to be cyclical. So if my partner is telling me is super defensive, and it drives me nuts that my partner is super defensive, what I might say is, well, what am I doing that might be making my partner feel like they need to defend themselves? That
Mm,
might be something that I might take personal responsibility over. Okay, well,
totally.
maybe the way that I address my partner reminds my partner of her father. And whenever I get angry, I stand up and it actually kind of scares my partner a little bit, and then they get a little defensive. So now I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to be less attacky, if that's a word, and find a way that I can change my part of the cycle. I'm wondering though what your thoughts are on taking personal responsibility.
Yeah. So I thank you for throwing it back at me.
Mhm.
I just finished this really interesting book called What Shamu Taught Me About Life, Love, and Marriage.
Yeah.
And it was written by this woman named Amy Sutherland. And she set out to, so the book was originally about animal training. And she went and spent time with the top animal trainers in the world. She went to the biggest zoos. She went to like SeaWorld. And she sat down with these people who train everything from birds to whales to pigs to monkeys, and they teach them to do these crazy things that aren't inherent in their natural behavior.
Mm.
And then after she finished doing this, she asked herself this question. She's like, what would happen if I took everything that I learned about animal training and applied it to my husband? And it was this really interesting theory. Humans are animals, we're mammals,
Yeah.
and maybe the same way that these people approach animal training could get her different results in her relationship. And what she found was that if she applied similar principles, that she actually saw similar results to the results that the animal trainers were getting. And so
Just through like positive reinforcement.
yeah, there was a couple of really interesting things that rules that she shared that were animal training rules. One is that every interaction you have with an animal is a training interaction, whether you're
Mhm.
consciously thinking about it or not. And when you think about training your partner, I think people kind of like recoil a little bit. Like, I'm not going to treat my
Not this
partner like a
gal.
dog, right? But you don't want to treat your partner like an animal, like a
Sure.
pet.
Yeah.
But also you have to think about how all throughout your day, you are doing things to reinforce or incentivize or de-incentivize specific behaviors.
Yep.
And it's the tone of voice that you use, it's the way you react to your partner's comments, it's whether or
Mhm.
not you give them some positive attention or negative attention or no attention when they say or do something. And
Mhm.
most of us subconsciously are doing this without even realizing it. And all animal training is, or training your partner is doing, is making the training exercises and the rewards incentives more conscious,
Mm.
and incentivizing your partner to do the thing that you want them to do. And so when I think of taking responsibility, to me, it's taking responsibility for the tone of voice that you use, for the negative behaviors, for ignoring negative behaviors and incentivizing positive behaviors,
Yeah.
for the environment. Like, one of the interesting things that she talked about in this book is that if you want to be a good trainer, you have to know the animal better than the animal knows itself. You have to know what it
Mm.
likes, what it doesn't like. You have to know when it's in a good mood or in a bad mood. You have to know when it's
Yep.
distracted or attentive. And you have to know that, like, oh, you have to be able to walk into an animal's enclosure and see it and be like, today's not going to be a good day to train it. It is
Yeah.
sleepy, or there's a gorilla next door that's distracting it. It's not going to be
Yeah.
able to focus. And so
Mm.
understand it when you understand your partner that well, and you can be attuned to them,
Ah,
really
you just
get
said the
like,
magic Gottman word, attune. That's
yes.
right. Yeah.
So you're attuned to your partner. Oh, if my partner comes home in a bad mood and is really stressed from work, tonight's probably not the best night to talk about why we haven't been having sex lately.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But she might really like a foot massage.
Right. Or maybe I could do something to I know that my partner, I know my partner well enough to know that what they really like is a good foot massage and maybe 30 minutes watching their favorite show uninterrupted. So
Mm.
rather than fighting them on this, I'm just going to say, hey, I can tell you're stressed out. Why don't you go lay down on the couch, watch the show? I'll take care of dinner. And
Yeah.
then after we're done eating, I'll give you a 30-minute foot massage and you can finish your show. And your
Amazing.
partner is just going to go, oh. And then at that
Uh-huh.
point, you go, hey, I know you've been really stressed at work lately. You're attuned. You know what's going on in their world. And then you can reward them. I just want to thank you for coming, for doing so much work. I know it's really hard and stressful. And also, something that I would really love, instead of complaining, ask for what you want, is
Yeah.
if we could have sex in the next couple of days, because I really miss you.
Yeah.
Do you think we could like put that on the calendar and maybe create some good romantic tension and some foreplay between us
Mhm.
in the next 48 hours and see
Yeah.
if we can have just like an amazing, I want you to have like mind blowing orgasm.
Yeah.
Does that sound good? And your partner's going
Yeah.
to be like, oh my gosh, I feel so taken care of and loved and
Totally.
appreciated. And now I'm on board with the thing that you want. And you are controlling the you're controlling the input that is affecting your partner's emotions and thoughts and words and actions. And
There's a yeah.
you can't
You
make your
there's
partner do something, but
no.
you can influence them.
Yeah.
And
There's a
that's what you have
phrase
control
that
over.
Terry Real uses, and I'm going to botch it, but you might be able to help me, but it's help me give you what you need so that I can get what I want. Help me
Yeah.
give you what you
It's your
need
responsibility to give your partner everything they need to give you
so
what
that
you
they
need.
can give you what you want. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mic
how
drop.
can I set my partner up to give me everything that I need? Is
Yeah.
there something that they need from me first to get me
Mm-hmm.
what I want? And like have that conversation with yourself. If there's things that you're not getting out of your relationship, what can you be responsible for giving your partner to set them up so that they can succeed at being a good partner for you?
Yeah, I do want to make a very strong distinction between what we're talking about and
Yeah.
what is sort of called like creating a ledger of, well, you folded the laundry today and you cooked dinner, and therefore your husband owes you sex. It's not about owing your partner
No.
anything. It's not a tit for tat. It's not a trade off. It's not a tally system,
Yeah.
because what we know in relationships, Dr. Gottman found that when you have this sort of ledger in your head of tally of, I did 3 great things for you today and you did nothing, that's when we start to get into this negative framework. But instead, it should
Definitely.
be just a constant thought of, how can I help to meet my partner's needs? How
Yeah.
can I be there for me? How can we scratch each other's back because we want to, not because it's owed? So I do want to draw a distinction between that. That's not what we're talking about.
Definitely. And I think another trap that you can fall into when you start doing this is you get
Mhm.
really excited. Like, I'm going to influence my partner and be like, I'm going to do everything I can to incentivize them to be the best partner they can be. And one thing that we sometimes forget is that, excuse me, hiccup. Um, Changing behavior takes time. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And going back to the animal trainer analogy, if a trainer is working with an animal to learn a new trick, sometimes it takes weeks or months or even years to learn
Hmm.
that trick. And the animal trainer has to take the mindset of, if the animal doesn't do exactly what I want the first time or the 30th time or the 300th time, you can't take it personally.
Mm.
It's not because the animal has a vendetta against me. They're not out to make my life miserable. They're just making slow progress toward an eventual goal. And I
Yeah.
think one of the mindsets you have to have is that you're not doing this with the expectation of your partner changing instantaneously. The goal is to adjust your behavior so that setting your partner up to succeed over time,
Love
and
it.
to not get discouraged by not seeing the end result, but to more be encouraged by the fact that you're showing up differently for your partner and you're showing up as a better version of yourself, and
Hmm.
find the reward and satisfaction in that and not necessarily in the immediate outcome.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Do we have
Because
time
there
for
is a
one more?
Yeah, let's do one more. I just feel like there's a tendency to sometimes, when you start delving into this conversation, for people to start taking responsibility for their partner for things that are, they don't have clear boundaries.
Hmm.
And so they start making themselves responsible for their partner's actions or words or feelings, and that's not the case. Like, all you're trying to
No.
do is just create an environment where your partner can succeed,
Yeah.
and that's what you can be proud of, even if it doesn't work out.
Good stuff.
One
You're
more
one
question,
smart
one more
man.
question. You're a smart woman. We're a
Thank
good
you.
team.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the last one. And I'm excited to hear your opinion on this. How do individuals balance their independence in a relationship? We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but this
Hmm.
question particularly is interesting to me. I feel like I don't need my husband. I'm a very independent woman and am capable of doing everything on my own. It takes effort to depend on my man. He needs me to depend, but he needs me to depend on him. Our past has been scattered with times that I have depended on him and he's not done what he said he would. This always feels like a breach of trust to me. To depend on him, I need to truly trust him. I don't know if I am capable of that. How can I trust him fully and depend on him and remain the strong, independent woman that I am? I'm really excited to hear your response, because you are a strong, independent woman. And I think that you're going to have a lot of thoughtful advice for this woman in this position.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny before I met my husband, I was in what I would call like the peak of independence in my life. I just graduated from college for my undergrad. I was feeling very lively and accomplished, and I really felt like this was my time to do my thing. And before I knew it, this beautiful man walked into my life, and we began a friendship, and I was dead set on letting him know that I could do it myself. I didn't need him in my life. I was an independent woman. Well, I ended up marrying that man. He proposed 10 months later. So apparently I didn't put that vibe off strong enough. But when I heard the message of there have been these times where I have relied on my husband in the past and he hasn't been there for me, and it feels like a breach of trust, 100%. It absolutely has been. Um, Dr. Gottman calls what he refers to these moments in life that happen, and they happen in some of the smallest times. It's this idea of having your partner's back or being there for your partner. And it's you have this opportunity to either build trust or break trust the way in
Yeah.
which you respond to that. So one example just might be that, um, you say, oh, you're talking to your partner on the phone as they're driving home from work, and you say, by the way, I'm making this for dinner. Can you please stop off at the grocery store and pick this up? Yeah, no problem. They get home and they're 30 minutes late,
Whoops.
and they completely forgot to get whatever you needed, but they got whatever they needed. So they come home and they have their stack of goodies, and they missed everything that you asked for. Is this a breach of trust? Is this a betrayal? Yeah, I would say that this is a missed opportunity for your partner to demonstrate that they have your back. And these moments happen so frequently in relationships that we need to be able to create moments of trust building rather than trust diminishing. And there really needs to be a balance. And Dr. Gottman has this beautiful ratio that he calls the 20-to-1 ratio, that in a healthy relationship, we are creating these trust building moments in our life 20 times versus the one time where we're diminishing trust, where we're turning away from our partner.
The magic ratio.
It's the magic ratio. In conflict, he says that you still need to be creating these moments of trust and connection of a 5-to-1 ratio. That's healthy conflict still has an overwhelming more amount of times where you're building moments of trust rather than breaking moments of trust. So what can I say? Trust is built in small gestures. It's not built in momentous giant occasions. Oftentimes couples will say, well, actually, this is kind of interesting. What percentage of divorces would say that an affair was the reason for the divorce?
So you're
It's
asking me
a
this question
lot.
for real?
No, I'm going to answer it, but it's a lot
Okay, good.
smaller than what you
Yeah,
would assume.
not that many.
It's not that many because it's not that big one time, big, massive break of trust. It's all the tiny, I call it death by a million cuts.
Paper
It's
cuts, yeah.
paper cuts. Yeah, it's all of the tiny little moments that have built up over time, the cumulative impact. So I actually don't remember the original question, but I got off
So,
on a
okay,
tangent.
so this is how we rebuild trust. So what's happening here is you have a strong, independent woman who doesn't think she needs her husband, but her husband needs her to rely on him to feel secure. So, and she feels like there's been past instances in the past where she has relied on him and he just lets her down.
Yeah.
So how does
Mm,
she move forward in her marriage in a partnership while not needing a partnership?
yeah. Well, I think it's healthy and great that she knows that her partner needs that, right? It's something where it helps him to feel valued and loved. Is this feeling that she needs him to be in that partnership?
Right.
Um, Even though I think it's fine. I think it's totally okay that she has this difference in independence. We call this like a perpetual or fundamental difference between partners. They're not compatible, which is great. They're complementary in that she needs independence and he needs to feel needed. And that's totally okay. How do you navigate those differences for the longevity of the relationship? You don't try and solve it because you're never going to wake up Miss
Problem's
Independent.
never going to go away.
It's never going to go away. She's always going to be independent. She's always going to have a very different feeling than her partner does. And I think it's a good thing to just be able to have a conversation and say, wow, we are just so different when it comes to this one area of our life. I'm
Right.
independent, you less so. So you recognize, you name it, you talk about it, and recognize that you're going to feel this friction for the rest of your life, but it's not a problem to solve, it's a tension to manage. So
Right.
then it becomes, how do you talk about this tension? How do you get through this? I think we actually did an entire webinar on the, how to manage tensions in your relationship when they're going to be perpetual for the rest of your
Yeah.
life. Yeah. What are you thinking about with this question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how, another thing from John Gottman's research is that 69% of marriage conflict is unresolvable conflict.
Yeah.
So this sounds
Yeah.
like it's one of those unresolvable conflicts, like what you're
Yeah.
talking about. And one of the things that I struggle with in my marriage with unresolvable conflict is, and this is my contemptuous nature coming into play, is not trying to take the moral high ground because my way of approaching life is better than my wife's way of approaching life.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think in this instance, I would just urge this wife to be a little cautious of saying like, I'm independent, I'm trustworthy, I'm reliable, I can take care of myself, I can do it all myself, and my way is the right way. And my
Mm-hmm.
husband's weak or imperfect because he needs me to rely on him, or he wants partnership. He wants
Wow.
me, he wants us to work together.
Yeah.
I think if you approach this perpetual conflict with that lens of
Mm-hmm.
kind of this moral superiority, which I'm very familiar with, you're never gonna reach. First of all, the problem is just never going to go away. Period. But
Yeah.
you're never going to find a way to manage the problem in a way that makes it have the least impact on your relationship. And that's what you want
Yeah.
to do with perpetual problems, is just diminish the impact that they have on your relationship. Get so good at managing that conflict or managing that disagreement that it feels more like a speed bump than a giant cliff every time
Right.
you come up against it. And
Yeah.
so, just kind of like getting clear that just because you're really independent and capable doesn't make your partner less than or worse than you. And on the flip side, how can you, well, you talked a lot about this earlier on a different question, but seek understanding. How
Yeah.
can you get inside your partner's world and understand what it is they truly want when they're asking you to depend on them a little bit more?
Yeah.
Like
Because you might
maybe,
have a different idea in your head of what that looks like.
yeah, and this might be the thing, like giving him, yielding a little bit on your independence a little bit might actually provide him with exactly what he needs to be motivated to be the best possible husband he can be.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can give him a little bit of appreciation or throw him a bone every now and then and say, hey, could you help me hang this picture or take care of this thing for me,
I
even though
need
you're
this pickle
completely
jar
capable of it?
open. Yeah.
Yeah, he, maybe that one little thing makes him feel more like a man and more capable, and he starts
Yeah.
showing up more like the man you want him to be.
Yeah.
And so, just because you're capable doesn't mean that, how to put it, I was thinking about this the other day. What's best for you is not always what's best for the marriage. But if you put what's best for the marriage first, you will always win eventually.
Hmm.
So what's best for you in the moment
Wow.
might be to be independent and to do things your way. But what's best for your marriage might be to rely on your partner a little bit more and yield a little bit to his way of living. And even though it might mean a loss for you immediately, it might
Mm-hmm.
mean a huge win for you over the extension of time and for your relationship. And this is also what Dr. Gottman talks about, allowing your partner to influence you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the two people put together make one really competent adult if you're lucky. And your partner's lack of independence might actually be exactly what you need to soften up a little bit and learn to
Yeah.
enjoy life a little bit more, and learn to let somebody dote on you and help you relax and
Yeah.
have a little bit more fun, because you might be the type of person who's all go go go, driver driver driver, never stop,
Yeah.
always doing everything. And maybe that's exactly what you need, is to
Those
learn that lesson of
compatible
slowing
roles.
things down. Yep, it's
Yeah.
compatibility. So
You know
that's
what?
those are some thoughts that I have.
Yeah. And I also was just thinking in this particular instance, if she's an independent woman and her husband has failed her in the past, when she's finally sort of let the reins go a little bit and said, all right, I'll rely on you for this, and then he doesn't come through, maybe it's because it hasn't been consistent. Or maybe it's because he's thinking, well, she's an independent woman. She could do it herself if I don't come through
Right.
this one time. But if there is very interesting, I like this. And it does touch on my independence quite a bit, though I have lost that independent role. I'm very dependent on my husband now.
That's funny. We
Yeah.
could talk. I mean, we could go on for another hour about forgiveness and and making repairs
Yeah.
on stuff like that. And we could talk. There's a lot more here.
I know.
If this isn't like hitting home for you, a great thing to do. There's two things that I would recommend. One, you could reach out to Laura, and you could actually do a couple sessions with her to work
Yep.
through some of the more complicated issues that might be coming up for you. Or two,
Yep.
you can come to one of our 7 principles for making marriage work workshops that are coming up. We have almost sold out of every single one. I think we have like 2 or 3, maybe 4 spots
Yep.
in a handful of them.
I'm going to give the
So
dates. Are you ready?
yeah, what are the dates?
So I'm coming down October 25th and 26th. In case you're
Like,
wondering where I'm coming down from, I'm in Bend, Oregon. So I fly in.
cool.
And so it's a Friday evening from 6 to 9 p.m. And then the following Saturday, it's from 9 until 4 p.m. So I have October 25th and 26th. And then 2 weeks later, it'll be on November 8th and 9th. So this is a 2-day workshop. I'm just giving you the 3 separate dates. And
Yep.
then in the new year, we have January 24th and 25th. I'll tell you that I think we only have like 1 seat left for November.
Yeah.
And then like 3 or 4 in the other 2 dates. So
Yep.
if you're interested, they go to utahdatenight.com and you scroll midway through and it says
7 principles. Just click on
7
the 7 principles
principles.
link, and
Yeah.
you can get the tickets for your date. And
Yeah.
we'd be happy to hang out with you. It's a lot smaller than the date night event.
Yes, it is.
We typically have between 20 and 30 couples. And that gives us a chance to couples get the time and space to work on their own on some of this stuff. And if they need help, they can get a little bit of one-on-one attention, and we take things a little bit more at their pace. So we'd
Yeah.
love to have you there. If you want to see some testimonials, I'll link to them below in this video. And I'll also put timestamps in there, which now we're at the end of the video. That doesn't matter to you, but
Yeah.
I think that's all
Cool.
our time. Do you have anything else you want to say to everybody?
Nope. If you're interested in finding me, laurahechtherapy.com, and it's like, what the heck? So laurahechtherapy.com.
What the heck?
What the heck?
Awesome.
Who is
Well,
this
we
girl?
will be having Laura back for more stuff. So if you enjoyed this,
Thank you.
this little session, we're going to be doing a lot more Q&As and a lot more of really cool work with Laura. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel if you want to be notified when we do more stuff like this. And thanks for tuning in and watching us answer these questions. I hope that you found them useful. I hope they made you think, and I hope that they give you some ideas of things that you can do, not just think about, but do, that will help your relationship become even stronger than it is right now. Thanks for tuning in. So, how do I stop the recording?